Welcome to Grandma Magic, a podcast from the Grandmother Collective. We are a nonprofit organization that supports and advocates for a world where our grandmother's power is seen, cultivated, and activated for positive change. The Grandma Magic podcast is an opportunity to learn more about the unique roles that grandmothers, aunties, and other older women around the world can play in advancing positive social development by talking to and learning from grandmother changemakers. We hope this series inspires you, brings you joy, and helps you recognize the enduring magic and wisdom that comes from grandmothers everywhere. I'm Lindsay Farrell, and I'm your host. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Christine Crosby, a proud grandmother of 5 and great-grandmother to 1. Christine is the CEO of Grand Media, the publishers of Grand Magazine, which has been the premier lifestyle magazine for the 55-plus audience for nearly 2 decades. I think you're turning 20 in October.
Right.
That's a milestone that reflects Christine's dedication to providing information and inspiration for living an ageful life, with a special focus on the incredible stage of being a grandparent. Christine has grown Grand Media into an integrated media platform that reaches this market through website, newsletters, and social media. She's passionate about creating and curating engaging content, and she also values the power of user-generated content, showcasing real-life stories that highlight the diversity and richness of the ageless generation. Today, we'll dive into Christine's inspiring journey and explore how she has influenced the way we think about aging, grandparenting, and living a full, vibrant life. Christine Crosby is also one of our advisors at the Grandmother Collective. So I'm so happy you're here today and that we're getting the chance to connect.
Well, thank you, Lindsay. I feel very honored to be here. I mean that.
So, Christine, what I told you is what we've been doing the whole season, because we believe so strongly that it is really many of our older women that ensure that we have traditions to pass down, that we have traditions that share our values with the next generation. I've been asking all of my guests to share a tradition or a ritual or something that they are making sure that they're passing down to the generations after them. Do you want to share one of those with us?
Well, that is such a great question. And, my mind goes to so many different directions. But I'll have to confess, I did not come from a traditional family where we gathered around the Christmas tree and had all the things. I won't go into it too much, but I think my family was identified as the most dysfunctional family in New York State at the time I was a little girl. So I really didn't come up with a lot of traditions per se that I passed along. However, I did have a grandmother who was by far my most inspirational person in my life. She was the anchor I had while growing up in a family that was terribly, terribly dysfunctional. Well, I won't go into it too much, but there was not wellness. The people were not well. My parents were not well, and they both died very young. My dad died at 45 and my mom at 54. So their lifestyles were not healthy, and so the children they had, I don't think grew up in that type of traditional, everything is wonderful home. However, as I said, back to my grandmother, her name was Leah Courier, and she gave me some traditions, if you will, but it was really more thinking of how you thought of yourself. And I learned from her the secret of rational thinking. And then later in life, I actually took courses and became more involved with it. Today, it's referred to as cognitive behavioral therapy. But it's really a very basic way to think. And I try to make sure that my grandchildren, I certainly tried to make sure my 2 daughters had this skill, if you will. And I make sure that my grandchildren hear it from me as well. Whether it sticks or not, who knows? But bottom line is you've got to watch what you're thinking, what you're telling yourself, and ask yourself, is it true? Where's the proof? And then go from there. But so many times people get ideas in their heads and they go with it. I'm ugly, I'm stupid, I'm whatever. And those types of self-esteem issues, I think, are the core to growing a successful life, to being happy. So that's sort of my tradition. I don't know if it's as traditional as most traditions. But my kids and grandkids, oh my God, yes, I know what I'm thinking. I'm trying to, but I challenge them to be rational thinkers. I guess that's it.
I think what we're learning this season when we ask this question is so frequently it's not a recipe. The thing that is the most valuable piece of advice or piece of information is not what we traditionally think of as traditions. And I've been really loving that it's coming out in these various ways. So it pushes us to remind ourselves that we want to understand where we came from and how we belong in the world. But at the same time, we're ever evolving. And I think it sounds to me like you've been really actively trying to not replicate the childhood that you dealt with. And that's yielded really great results. And of course, there's a grandma at the center of that. When we first started really looking for and finding groups in the grandparenting space and the grandmothering space, your name kept coming up because you had started to convene people working on grandparent work across the nation. And I'm just so curious, can you tell us how you ended up being the center of conversations about modern grandparenting?
Gosh, I'm not so sure I have the answer other than I just do what I do. And, that keep on trucking thing. I am a collaborator and I learned that ability. I just naturally do it, I think. When I was a young woman starting in business, I realized quickly I didn't have all the answers and I didn't have all the experiences to solve the problems or find the answers to big questions, but I could find people that did. And if I honored them enough with asking a question and listening, I would learn from them. So that collaborative spirit was always ingrained in me. And it certainly made sense when I entered into the world of grandparenting. Natural collaborators, I think grandparents are, and they already get it. They are not trying to hold things to themselves and be selfish. They want to give, and I think, have learned that lesson. So that's the origin of it, quite frankly. When I started Grand, I realized after many years, and we experienced some serious hardships surviving. One of the big issues was the fall of the economy in 2008. That, oh my gosh, I really realized then I could not do this alone. There was so much more to be done to spread the word of how grandparents are making a big difference. So certainly I reached out to anyone that I found. And at the time, it was about 8 women who were doing websites around the country and not trying to make money out of it, not trying to do anything grandiose, but just from the heart, from the spirit. They were sharing their wealth of knowledge and their creativity and passion and love for their families. And it was very inspiring. So joining with these 5 other women at first, and then we added a guy and then another guy, it was very inspiring because, again, each of us individually don't have all the answers, but together we do. At least that's my way of looking at it.
So when you first started, what were you trying to do? There was a gap that you must have been filling.
If you'd like, Lindsay, I can kind of give you the thumbnail because it really is a path that I look at and I go, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And when I say I didn't have any grandiose goals, I really did have a grandiose goal, but I didn't know how grandiose it was. I wanted to save children. I honestly felt that we needed to be better at parenting. And certainly I hadn't even thought of grandparenting at the time when I first launched myself into this world. But real quickly, I started out again as a young mom and then a single mom for a lot of years. And I went out and started a business that I just was so fortunate that it just did well. I was in Orlando, Florida, made a lot of money. It expanded. It was just a miraculous experience. I was at the right time, the right place. But guess what? After 12 years, there was not that passion. I didn't have the heart for it anymore. And I said to my partner at the time, I really need to take a couple years off and figure out what really is going to fill my heart more. What's my real meaning? Why am I here? It can't be just to make money, right? I mean, that's good. I love that. No bad thing about making money and being successful and having fun things. So I took 2 years off and right away I landed into the world of publishing. And at one point I started a little book publishing company. And then I was submitted a manuscript by two women who told the story, the true story of the last 5 days of a little 5-year-old girl's life. And she was the victim of heinous child abuse and neglect, not too far from where I lived in Orlando. And it changed my life. I said, by golly, I'm going to do something. I've got the money, I've got the time, and I'm interested in helping. So it launched me into the world of child and family advocacy. And it helped me learn so much about families and the needs that we all have. But more important, how it is everyone's responsibility to protect children, whether they're yours or someone else's. As Hillary Clinton said, it does take a village. And how do we inspire people to do it? Well, long story short, that experience of publishing that book was huge for me. And after a couple, 3 years of working with the authors and doing well, I thought we have to work in prevention. We can't just talk about how the bad things are in our world. We have to prevent it. And it really just no brainer. Well, how about we start a parenting magazine? How do we help young moms and young dads? And what are the resources that we can put forward that they can access that might help them? Had this young mom who was complicit in the death of her daughter, had she had some lifelines in the community, I don't think that would have happened. What did happen? She was totally reliant upon a boyfriend and was alone, etc. So anyway, that was my goal. How do I present that? So I started a magazine for parents. And it was called Central Florida Family. And it did very well. There was a taste for it. Everybody was embracing it. I felt good. So then we launched Tampa Bay Family. Then we launched Jacksonville Family. And then I had an idea to launch Black Family Today. And this is all over an 8-year period, Lindsay. At that time, I was approaching the age of 50, and I'd always had a goal to retire at 50. I thought, that sounds good. I want to be one of those people that retires at 50. Well, I was very fortunate in that I sold that company to the Chicago Tribune the month I turned 50. And I was very satisfied and happy with my life. I thought, okay, good. I'm off now on another adventure. And I married my sweetheart, moved to the west coast of Florida, and voila, I became a grandmom. Now, this wasn't my first experience as a grandmother. I had become a grandmother very, very young when my oldest daughter had a child, very, very young. So I was not ready. I was not willing, quite honestly, to embrace that role. I was very young and very self-absorbed. But now I'm older. Now I'm 52, I guess I was. And I was just, wow, how do I do this? What are the tools I need? Who should I rely on to give me the right information? So it was a no-brainer for me again. I'm going to start a magazine for grandparents, and I'm going to find all the experts, and we're going to put that information out there. We're going to help grandparents. And that's how Grand Magazine started and what got me on this road. It was quite an adventure. My husband joined me. My best friend joined me. Other good people helped out. We all put our money in, our time and our energy, and it was very successful. We started off, boom, 3 years, we were doing all the right things until the 2008 happened. Well, it was how I began this journey, which, you know, certainly in my 20s or 30s or 40s, I really didn't see this as my path, but it organically transpired. It just took me over it and I did it. And that, I guess, is sort of how I operate. I've got a passion. I'll follow it. And sometimes I don't ask the right questions. I just go ahead and do it anyway. It's been a phenomenal experience. The things I've learned, and most certainly, is that grandparenting is not something, just like parenting, that you are born knowing. As much as you think you might have those nurturing instincts or whatever the basic core human keeping our babies alive instincts are, there's a lot to being a grandparent to be effective so that you are successful in that role. And that's what these experts, many wonderful people, have helped me learn over the years. So I guess it wasn't, I'm just doing it for other people. I was doing it for myself as well, as you can see.
Tell me about modern grandparenting. In 20 years, what do you think has changed in the ways that grandparents are approaching this life shift?
Well, first and foremost, I'll have to tell you a little story. We used to go to baby expos when we first launched Grand Magazine because we thought, well, where are we going to find grandparents at baby expos where the moms are and the new babies, right? And it was ironic how many times we would hold up a magazine and say, hey, would you like a copy of this magazine for grandparents? And the mom and or the dad or both would go, huh, do I look old enough to be a grandparent to you? And they would walk on by. I mean, they wouldn't even take the magazine. I mean, I'm not everybody, but this would happen frequently. And we were stunned by it. So basically what I learned right off was how much rejection there was to the role of being a grandparent, being called a grandparent, being a granny, being a grandpa. It just smacked of old age and decrepitude, and nobody wanted to associate with that. It was just something that unfortunately our society, our such youth cultured society, had imbued in us so much that, oh my gosh, people were rejecting one of the most beautiful stages of life because they felt it made them look old. So this lesson has really been a big part of this. As we grow and learn and mature, as you know, we hopefully, if we're doing it right, we let go of that ego part. And that allows us a lot more freedom to be more who we are and to give without asking for back. And I think regardless, grandchildren, you get so much back from being a grandparent. It's really almost criminal. If you want to be happy, if you want to feel youthful, if you want to feel hopeful, if you want joy, hang out with grandkids. You know, there's no question about it. That's what you get out of it. So I think it is important for us to learn the skills and develop the abilities to give back to those children. And by the way, it's not just to the grandchildren, it's to your children, back to your children too, to show them the respect and to honor them for the role that they're now taking on and passing that baton. It's not literal, of course, but it is a real thing you're doing where you're letting go of the parental power and you're passing it to your child and you're willing to let them make the mistakes they're going to make without trying to correct them every minute. It's just the same thing with children, you know, when they're little. You don't want to always say no, no, no. You want to say yes, yes, yes. So same thing kind of applies to when you become a grandparent. And now you want your children to feel free and confident to fulfill the role that they have, which, by the way, if you do that well, they will then welcome you in to that group and you become more imbued in the life that they are building anew. So I feel that the skills are really important to learn about how to let go of the ego, let your children be the parent, take the control, and to learn to be more on the outside and influence in a way that's not so up your nose in your face and causes families to break up. It really does. Alienation of grandparents and estrangement is huge in our country. I had no idea until I started publishing Grand how many grandparents are not allowed to even be in the lives of their grandkids. So there's work to be done to do this well. And it's not just a frivolous, be fun, make cookies. It's a very serious role that we play in families. So I don't know if that sounded like I was pontificating here, but it's kind of the grasp of what I think is heart to this.
Do you think 20 years later that we've tackled the anti-ageism that made people not want to take your initial magazine?
I think it's moving in that direction. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. But then again, I don't know if I have a jaundiced view because I'm so much older and I'm hanging out with people who are luxuriating in the experience of being grandparents. People who've crossed that threshold of, oh my God, if I'm a grandmother, that means I'm not sexy anymore. Oh, it means men won't find me attractive. I mean, so I've spent the last 20 years doing this, and I'd have to say the last 5-10 years, I really see once you embrace it, you forget that ego part, but it's still there. Things don't change that quickly, as we know. It takes years for societies to evolve and to embrace the quality of life that you get as you age. And I thought about your question earlier. we've been aging since we're born, right? So somehow or another, we say we're aging only after a certain time we're aging. And that's not true. We're always aging. We've been aging all our lives. And perhaps if we can stop putting it on once you turn 40, oh my God, now you're, or 50, now you're going to join AERP and you're old. I don't get it, but a lot of people fall into that trap. But I think it is becoming more desirable to claim grandparenthood than it was, say, in even the early 2000s. I think now that is moving in the right direction, but not a lot.
We have a woman here in Philadelphia that calls herself Gigi, gorgeous grandma. And there's a whole kind of movement, it seems, to actually shift that narrative that you are decaying, which of course you're not, and like kind of capture that there's a hipness or a coolness in grandparenting. We've been using this term grandma magic. This is true. It comes from my own experience as a mother. So I'm in my 40s. I have a young daughter. And it wasn't until I saw firsthand the very special role that my mother plays in her life and in my life that we've actually transitioned into a new phase of our family. And I can see the magic that comes from an older woman, the not primary parent, and the ways in which she can influence my daughter, influence my niece and nephew so uniquely. And I wonder if you, as a grandmother yourself, and as somebody who spent a lot of time in this, what do you think is the uniqueness of women? Grandmother Collective is based on the idea that we have this incredible resource of older women who are able to make change quite differently than other women or men because they have a magic. That magic is empathy and collaboration and selflessness and all the things that you've talked about. But I wonder if you can reflect on what you see as that kind of uniqueness of women in aging.
When you say women, I have a little bit of resistance to it because certainly men, grandfathers experience this. And I'm here to tell you, if I've witnessed any big shift in society, to me, I have seen grandfathers stepping up like I did not think they would before. And they have. At first, they weren't, first 5, 7, 8 years. So anyway, I just want to make sure that we don't forget the fact that the granddad is in here and playing that role. And I think they're experiencing much of the same things, is my point, I guess. My husband had a lovely expression back in the days when we first launched. He said, grandparenting is when you are able to see life go on without you. And when you grasp that internally, when you really realize that, you go, oh my goodness, that is like immortality. That's magical for sure. And that's really what you're touching. You're touching life beyond you. And what are you going to do with that gift or that opportunity? And once you realize that, and maybe others experience it by using different language, of course, but that's the core of how I see it. There's a calmness. There is a sense of, you must not screw this up. you know your time is limited. That's the idea. You're not going to have forever to keep making mistake after mistake or ignoring or pretending it doesn't count. It does count. Everyone is looking at you. Your grandchildren are watching and hearing every word you say, and your children are. Even if you're in a situation where it doesn't appear they are. Because just like my daughter and I can't tell you how many times we show up at an event, we're wearing the same outfit almost, because we are so alike in so many ways that it appears all the time that, oh, I just bought this, or this thing I love now, or this movie. But anyway, that is what I feel. I think that great level of empathy, knowing that your children are going to have to go through what it is that you went through. The issue of vanity is gone, hopefully gone. I mean, certainly in this relationship, you don't care if you're wearing lipstick and your hair is pretty, whatever. You are with little people who are hungry to hear and learn about life And so you realize that responsibility is beyond important and it's precious. And so take this gift and treat it like it is a very precious gift.
I really love that word responsibility. And I think when I've been talking to people, as I have been regularly, that responsibility moves beyond the family. That there is a sense that people have that in their later years, they now belong to the community. Does that resonate?
Oh, it absolutely resonates. Interesting. I was, for all the reasons you know, we're thinking about national politics at this time. My hero is Nancy Pelosi. She is a woman. Now, 20 years ago, I really didn't know who she was. We interviewed her for Grand Magazine, not once, but twice. We'd also interviewed Joe Biden, by the way. But anyway, she is my hero for so many reasons. She puts her family first, her grandchildren. There isn't a time you talk to her practically that she doesn't talk about her grandchildren, that she realizes what work she does is for them and their children and grandchildren. And that is the awareness that happens at this age. And hopefully, if you are developing properly, you will embrace that and do everything you can. And it is an amazingly wonderful time because you can let go of so many of those other things that you used to worry about when you were a young woman. You no longer are concerned whether that man is looking at you because you're going to go get on with it later or something. You are definitely putting forth what you believe and what you think is right for the future for civilization, children, our society. And I'm so thrilled to be this age at this time. I could not imagine what it would have been like. Well, I can imagine, just 100 years ago, how suppressed and oppressed women were. We had to do our work behind the scenes, or we were going to offend somebody. Well, that no longer applies. We can get right out there and say our truths today without having to go through all those shenanigans.
And the women who did speak out were labeled in very harmful ways. So your choice was to be a witch or your choice was to be compliant. And we still see that in other parts of the world and probably in other parts of the US, that there's a behind the scenes approach that women take. But we know grandmothers, it doesn't really seem to matter. They still have such a compelling interest in making the world better for the future. They find a way.
That's right. We have more strength, and I think there's less of what held us back. So if we're purposeful, we can get a lot done now that we might not have 20, 30 years ago when we were much younger. And again, back to my grandmother, Leah Courier, she was the town clerk for a little town in upstate New York. And I saw her in her 90s taking licenses, helping people get their hunting license or whatever they needed to do because that was her job. So she was working, providing a valued service to her community. And I was watching as a little girl, seeing this. So it was, to me, that's what older women do. I mean, she wasn't sitting in a rocking chair or boiling potatoes or whatever. She was actively. So she truly was a huge influence on my life. And I didn't live with her. I did not even live in the same state with her. So my time with her was very limited, occasional, but it still made that big impression on me. So I think that's a big lesson too, that grandmothers, grandfathers realize, even if you only get to see those kids a couple times a year, you have a big opportunity to impress on them for the rest of their lives if you take it seriously. I love talking about grandparenting, and I love this conversation, Lindsay. And I realize that you look at it from a lens that's much more sophisticated. I love that someone like you is doing this. I mean it. It's really important work that you're doing.
Thank you. I mean, but I'm the same as you. I have these vignettes of grandmothers. I actually did not have blood grandfathers that were alive. My mother had a stepfather who served as my grandfather, but I had two grandmothers and I didn't live near them. And even, the once or twice a year that we saw them was enough. It's exactly what you say, that I have these very clear memories of who they are, what they stood for, what their values were, how they contributed in their community, the kinds of things that they did for the family, which has just been passed down. Like I still cook my grandmother's turkey and we still make the other grandmother's. So I'm bringing back tradition of food, but like those are the things that were so significant and important. I had real matriarchs and I didn't see them every day. But that I think also sort of informs this work because it's so resonant in so many people. And I love this idea that you're saying, I remember my grandmother's being powerful. I had a model, and I know that I don't have to comply with a very outdated idea of what a grandmother is.
Yes, I was very fortunate. And believe me, I had no idea that that was happening at the time, of course. But in later year reflections, boy, she meant everything to me. And in many ways, I mean, voting was so important. Conservation was a message she gave us as well. And recycling, things that we know are critically important. She was teaching that back 60 years ago, 70 years ago. So, yes, I cannot ever underestimate the importance of grandparents in the life of children. They might think they're not having an impact, but they certainly are. And take that seriously because it's going to change lives, it's going to shape lives.
We've been talking a lot about what you have done. Is there anything you're thinking about for the future? Is there a next stage? What is your next step?
Well, thank you for asking that. You know, I am one of those people, Lindsay, I bet like you, I set goals in my life. I've always taken decades. I'll say, well, in my 40s, I want to do this, 50s, that, 60s, that, 70s, that. Well, I just entered my 80th year in August 3rd. And instead of telling people I turned 79, I say I have entered my 80th year. What does that mean? I don't know many role models right now. My grandmother lived to 99, by the way. So I get to have still in my mind how life can go on and be very productive. And she was not sickly. She lived very well and continued canning her fruit and doing the garden and going to her women's club meetings and voting and doing all the things that she did all her life, right up until a couple years before she died. So I do have that image there. Well, right now, my life, when I look back on it, I have been consumed with running businesses in my adult life. I started in my early 30s and I'm still doing it today. So I would like to find a forever home for my magazine, which is Grand Magazine. It's a digital magazine. And find collaborators, partners, strategic alliances, whatever I can to take the burden off me on the day-to-day running of the company because I want it to continue. I don't want to just close it and walk away and say, been there, done that. I think this effort deserves to continue and in the hands of those who I hope are brighter, faster, smarter, whatever. But let's continue this. Let's keep going because grandparenting is evolving. What I would like to do and see in my life is I want to help people who are in government. Well, I realize how important it is that we start even at a low level. Maybe it's our little city council. I live in a small town here off of St. Petersburg. And just being involved in our city government is, to me, a very important step for me. Now, do I want to run for office? Not necessarily, but I want to be very involved in finding the right people and then supporting them. That to me is my next phase of what can I do to influence more and in a meaningful way. So that's what I'm looking for. My husband is crazy. He's always saying, oh, Christine, you should have been senator. You should have been. Well, no, I never thought I had the brains to do all that, to remember everything you got to remember. But I certainly do want to be part of helping find those people and support them. And I've been kind of excited watching the DNC this week and finding the joy in being part of helping our world be better, not making it out to be something horrible and hard and disgustingly corrupt. No, we can transform our government into a way that is much more attractive for people to become part of it, right? young women we want to see. And boy, oh boy, we're looking at it now, aren't we? All over the world, we're seeing women becoming prime ministers and presidents. And that's exciting to me. So that's my answer, Lindsay. Whether or not I can fulfill that to the degree that it makes a difference, I don't know, but I'm going to try.
I think what we know is that the local is really important. And the local is where people feel connected and that they feel that they can belong. And the kinds of leadership that an older person, maybe women, which is usually my inclination, can bring to that is really different. It's a different perspective. And I think it's really important. So I wish you all the best and wish you well in that endeavor. It's the right place for you.
Well, thank you. I will do my best. And at the same time, I want to be a nurturer to Grand as it does get passed on or handed off to whoever can help make that. I don't think I'll ever want to give it up because I just feel connected to the future somehow. I remember when my granddaughter, this is my husband's biological daughter's daughter, okay, found out that I was her mother's mother. And I became, in her eyes, one of the most powerful people in the world because her mother is the most powerful. And then she discovered that her mother had a mother. And I can't tell you how I looked at that when she told me, she goes, "You're my mother's mother?" Oh, and she just looks up to me like, this is the greatest. So I don't know how that translates to everyone, but to me, I wear that badge pretty proudly. And I want to continue helping other women and men wear that badge proudly.
Christine, we could talk for a long time.
I'm sure we could.
And we will. We will continue to connect. But I want to thank you so much for being so candid about your life and sharing what you've learned and giving people some insights into grandmother power.
Well, thank you, Lindsay. Again, I salute you and Jen for the work that you're doing with the Grandmother Collective. It is quality all the way. And I'm very proud to be part of it in whatever little way I can. I'm honored. Thank you for this invitation and the time talking with you.
Thank you so much.